introducing the guest.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I not only stood by the reforms in 1991, I actually championed the cause of those reforms. And in 1991, can you see me?
Yes, I'm seeing you. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. So what happened was, Prabhakar, in 1991, not only I championed the cause of reforms. 1 minute, there is some technical problem. Okay, all right. So not only I stood by the reforms in 1991, I championed the cause of reforms, and I was the only one that time, and I went all over defending the reforms in the newspapers, in TV, and all other media. And now, later, many people joined the bandwagon. But at the time when I was talking about it, people, laughed at me and they ridiculed me. Anyway, but that is past history. Today, we are not going to talk about that. And Professor Parimal, you have made a very interesting observation that this is a sort of continuation of those reforms, because in 1991, when macroeconomic reforms were undertaken, that was done as a response to the unprecedented macroeconomic crisis which the country was facing at that time.
Right.
Our foreign exchange reserve had dwindled to a level of less than $1 billion. Our fiscal deficit was very high. Our external debt was very high. The short-term external debt was very high. And we were on the brink of a default. And India has always had an impeccable track record of honoring all our obligations. But in 1991, we came very close to a default. But then Dr. Manmohan Singh came into the picture. He became the finance minister, and that changed the whole thing, because he unleashed a large set of reforms, and that completely transformed the economy. And we are right now, until COVID-19 hit us, who have been enjoying the fruits of those reforms. In 1991 reforms, one thing which was conspicuous by absence was the reform of the agriculture sector. And many people say, and I agree with them, that what has happened now, these three bills which have now become acts, they are, in a way, are the much needed agricultural reforms which have finally happened. You know, the three ordinances which were issued earlier on June 5th of this year, they were presented to the Parliament during the latest monsoon session of the Parliament for converting them into relevant acts or an amendment to the existing act. While they were passed by Lok Sabha, that is the lower house, there was an unprecedented uproar. There was an unprecedented uproar in the Rajya Sabha. Amid some exceptionally unruly behavior by some parliamentarians, there was suspension of some MPs, followed by some opposition parties boycotting the session. And simultaneously, outside the parliament, there was a breakout of farmer agitations in North Indian states, particularly Punjab and Haryana, and also partly in Madhya Pradesh and in UP. In this particular talk, I'm not going to talk about the politics of reform, excepting a few references here and there, but I would like to focus on the substantive issues without taking any political position. So without talking about the politics of agricultural reforms, I'm going to talk about the substantive issues which have been thrown up because of these new acts. But before we do that, let us first understand the context in which the three ordinances were issued and these three acts were passed. Let us understand the context. First, the agricultural reforms, it is believed by many people, and I am included, and Professor Parimal also referred to that, agricultural reforms have been ignored far too long. They did not happen in 1991, and all these years, farmers have been under the clutches of middlemen and dalal. It is the middlemen who have become millionaires in India while the farmers have been in debt. And the urban consumers have been paying more and more every year for food and commercial crops. So who has benefited on agricultural side is the middleman. There is a story, unconfirmed story, but apparently during the emergency, I think it was 1975 or 1976, during the emergency days when the then Honorable Prime Minister Indira Gandhi came hard on money lenders, it was suggested to her that why don't we also control the middlemen? When she was advised to control the middlemen in agriculture, you know what was her answer? Reportedly, she simply said, should we stop contesting elections altogether? Because which means that all the political parties have always believed that touching the middleman in agriculture is going to be a political suicide. And therefore, they have refrained from that. Maybe that was the reason why in 1991, with a wide-ranging reforms, there were no reforms of the agricultural side, because these middlemen happen to be, until recently, and even today, they are the backbone. They happen to be backbones of many political parties. Let us not go into which parties these middlemen are, but you can easily guess in Maharashtra and at the national level how APMCs are dominated by politicians and political parties and political leaders. So what has happened now, I'm explaining the context of these three bills. The agricultural markets in India have been mainly regulated by what is called APMC at the state level, because this agriculture is a state subject. APMC means Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee. Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee, APMC. Typically, an APMC does the following thing. First, it regulates the trade of farmers' produce. And how does it do that? It provides licenses to buyers, to commission agents, and private markets. Two, they levy market fees or any other charges on that trade. And third one, they are supposed to provide the necessary infrastructure within their markets to facilitate trade in the agricultural produce. So this is typically the job of an APMC. Something very interesting happened in the year 2017-18. It had happened earlier also when I was a member of Planning Commission. The central government created a model APMC Act. Remember, agriculture is a state subject, but center can help in a spirit of cooperative federalism. So in 2017-18, the central government came up with a model APMC Act and also a model Contract Farming Act. The objectives of these two proposed acts was that first, for creation of restriction-free trade of agricultural produce. Second, for promoting competition to APMC through multiple marketing channels in addition to APMC. And third one, to encourage farming under pre-agreed ag contracts, which is also called contract farming. So these were the three objectives in mind. And with these objectives, the APMC, Model APMC Act was circulated to all the states, and the Model Contracting Act was also circulated by the central government, but that did not happen. Many states did not take it at all. In fact, now there is, as you are aware, there are many committees of the Parliament on various subjects, and I'm a part of many committees. There is a standing committee on agriculture, which in the year 2018-19, the standing committee on agriculture observed, they observed that the APMC laws are not implemented in their true spirit, and they need to be reformed urgently. This is the Standing Committee of the Parliament reporting in the year 2018-19, that the APMC laws are not implemented in their true spirit. I'm quoting, and they need to be reformed urgently. Second, this is very, very important. They said that the most APMCs have a limited number of traders which are operating, and because the number is limited, it leads to cartelization and it reduces competition. Now, cartelization, what does cartelization mean? That means few people come together and they govern everything, and they don't let any new member come in. Cartelization typically means that the traders and commission agents who are part of the cartel do not allow any easy entry of any new entities into their market yard. And this, of course, stifles the competition. In economics, this is called oligopoly. Like a monopoly of one institution, oligopoly is multiple agents coming together and controlling everything. So most of them were also had big political connection, but let's not go into that. So most APMCs, the Standing Committee observed, had a limited number of traders operating, which led to cartelization, and it reduced the competition. And what happened was, what was happening was, many APMCs have been charging undue commission and market fees. For trading under the APMC area, they have been charging, states have been charging all kinds of commission and market fees through APMC, and APMC would share that with the government, but there was understanding, and there is understanding between them. Fourthly, the APMC state acts, the Standing Committee reported, Standing Committee on Agriculture in 2018-19 reported that APMC state acts are highly restrictive in promoting multiple channels of marketing. Now, what are multiple channels of marketing? Right now, there is only one channel of marketing, and that is APMC. Now, what are the multiple channels? It can be more buyers. It can be direct sell to businesses. It can be direct sell to retail consumers. And most importantly, it can include online purchase and sale of agricultural produce. So what was happening, or what is happening even now before the acts were passed, was that the APMC Acts have been very restrictive in promotion of multiple channels of marketing. Now, this is the backdrop under which the Standing Committee, by the way, also observed and they recommended the Standing Committee on Agriculture of the Parliament, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture in 2018-19, they recommended that central government should establish a committee of agricultural ministers of all states to arrive at a consensus and to design a legal framework for agriculture marketing. This was the recommendation made by the Standing Committee. In July 2019, Center took initiative and they formed a high-powered committee of 7 chief ministers, not agriculture ministers of all states, 7 chief ministers. In July 2019, a high-powered committee of 7 chief ministers was set up, which included then Punjab chief minister as well, I happen to add. And they discussed the adoption and time-bound implementation of model acts by states and changes in the Essential Commodities Act of 1955 so as to attract private investment in the agricultural marketing and infrastructure. Not much came out of that report. So finally, the central government issued those 3 ordinances, and that happened in June 5th, 2020. By the way, the high-powered committee of 7 CMs, which I said before, included the then Punjab CM, Akali Dal CM as well. He strongly was argued by this committee that there should be coordination and that we have to have a time-bound implementation of Model Act, and even contract farming, they encouraged, they drew the same line, the 7 CMs of 7 big states. But nothing concrete came out of that in a way that no action was taken by the central government. But in June, on June 5th, these 3 ordinances were promulgated, and it is these 3 ordinances which came up for ratification. As you are aware, ordinances issued in between when the parliamentation is not on, and within 6 months after that, the ordinances have to be converted into an act by passing them in both houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. If that doesn't happen, the ordinance is a failure in the sense that the government has to withdraw. That is why, in spite of the COVID-19 and difficulties that all of us are fully aware of, they had to convene a parliament session, because by law, there can't be a gap of more than 6 months between any 2 consecutive sessions. So they had to convene a session, and they had to, there were 11 or 12 ordinances, 5 of them were about COVID. So they had to have this to get them through. Otherwise, even the COVID ordinances would have been null and void. So that is what happened. And these 3 ordinances were converted into acts under a very volatile and cantankerous situation, as I mentioned before. There were 3 bills which were presented to Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. First, the name is long. First, the most controversial is the Farmers Produce, Trade and Commerce in bracket Promotion and Facilitation Act of 2020. I'm going to call it only for the purpose of this lecture as FPTC Act. Our first act, FPTC Act, that is Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce in bracket Promotion and Facilitation bracket complete Act of 2020. This is Act 1, FPTC Act. Second one, again has a long title, the Farmers in bracket Empowerment and Protection bracket complete Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act of 2020. This I'm abbreviating simply as FAPA and FS Act, or even simple is Contract Farming Act or Act 2. So the second act that we're going to discuss is the basically Contract Farming Act. Third one that we are going to discuss is the Essential Commodities Amendment Act of 2020. As you may be aware, the Essential Commodities Act was passed first time in 1955, and now that act has been amended, so it is called the Essential Commodities Amendment Act of 2020, EC Act of 2020.